So, you're collaborating with someone to make a thing. You're well underway production-wise, work is being done steadily, everyone knows what their role is, and people are excited to see what you're cooking up. You're excited, and you should be. Even amid all the terrible news, there's a lot of great stuff being made right now, especially when we look at online communities like the indie space. But then, before you can even register what's happening, one small claim has been made about a person you're working with. This person has either said or done some unsavory things prior to joining your team that you weren't aware of. Maybe you tried to do a background check on them beforehand, but came up empty. Or maybe you didn't because not everyone feels like they should have to conduct a police check on every single person who just wants to make something online. But regardless of whether you knew or not of this person's past, it doesn't matter. They've been outed by the public and are being slammed for their actions, so now you and the other team members involved are in the crossfire, which of course means your project is too, and now everything is going up in smoke and you can no longer continue with what you were doing. Or can you? I'll be the first to pipe up about how much I love online collaborative projects. I think they're really helpful for getting people involved with a specific community they care about, they can help you come out of your shell, and they can make you feel as if you've contributed some pretty cool things. Before fully committing to YouTube, I used to, and still do on occasion, take part in a few reanimated projects. And basically what those are is they are fan projects where you choose a piece of media, you cut it up into small shots, you divvy out each shot to a specific fan, and they recreate it in their own vision. It's really fun and is a great first step towards pursuing something a bit larger, such as creating your own animated project, which is what a lot of indie creators have decided to do as of late. But with that said, as with quite literally anything else online, these projects always come with the risk of someone coming aboard who may not be perceived as the best person. Maybe they're just kind of a dick to people, or maybe they've done something worse, but regardless, this is always a risk that comes with interacting with strangers. You never know a person's full story from the other side of a screen. This is something I've seen people discuss on and off in the last few years when it comes to animation communities, especially since for some reason animation fan circles tend to attract some pretty strange people, and that's something you do especially need to be aware of if you have the aim of managing a project online. And a big component of that is in part due to how much indie communities, animation and games in particular, have exploded, leading to more and more people wanting to buddy up and work on something together. This in itself is not a terrible thing by any stretch, but the rate of it, combined with the lower barrier for entry that indie productions afford, means that more instances of a crew member or even a creator being outed for terrible past behaviour, and potentially even causing issues for the production and its crew in the present, are probably going to be brought to light. I do want to preface this by saying that this topic has been brought on by some recent events that I don't particularly want to highlight too specifically, and that's because it isn't the first of its kind in which this has happened, and it absolutely will not be the last. So I would much rather approach this as more of a learning moment as opposed to yet another call out being added to the pile of whatever drama of the week people may assume is being discussed. There's always going to be controversies and missteps happening, and that's not really something we can fully control. But I think the more awareness is brought to how these kinds of issues should be approached and handled, then hopefully the less of them there will be. Or at the least they may not go on for as long. Hopefully. With all of that said, hi everyone, my name is fionapollo. I'm an artist/animator who manages her own teeny tiny indie animation project, and today I wanted to look into what to do if you find out that a person or production you've been working on is being publicly slammed or cancelled online, what that means for you or the future of the project, and how to deal with any potential fallout. Please note that I am not an authority on this, it's mostly just going to be my own thoughts and opinions based on observations of a good many instances that have gone on in various communities. I'm hoping that a lot of it will come across as common sense for most of you, but when you are in the thick of it and that little seed of panic starts to seep in, sometimes that can make people a bit impulsive and your judgment does get a bit clouded, so that's what I'm hoping to help with here. I'm not trying to come across like people don't do this stuff already, but that panic response is something I've noticed every so often, and the reaction to a serious claim can sometimes end up being just as important as the inciting incident in a place so focused on perception and public opinion as the internet. But if you like what I have to say, then please consider liking and subscribing. I talk a lot about fandom culture, media tropes, and all that good stuff, so you're bound to find something on my channel to enjoy. But with that said, let's get to it. Exhibit A. You're gonna have to forgive me, I'm recovering from like a really bad case of lurgy. There's no way in hell this is gonna cover everything, but we'll go ahead and use 3 examples of varying severity. Also, I know this may be hard to believe, but some people on the internet do so love to stretch the truth a smidge. Not only that, but controversy comes in levels, and not every issue with a person should necessarily be dealt with using the same intensity. So be sure to take everything I say here with a bit of salt, and try to bear in mind that the majority of these situations are unique, and may likely require at least some degree of investigation. It's probably also worth noting that the emphasis here isn't on whether any of the claims lobbied against the accused are true or not. What we're looking at is a process of dealing with them regardless, for the benefit of your project and the rest of your team. So let's start with something small. Let's say a member of the public had a dealing with someone on your team ages ago. Let's call him Jeff, and came away from the interaction thinking that Jeff is an arsehole. Being an arsehole itself comes in varying shades, but let's just say it was an old squabble between friends or something, and that person decides they want to make their grievances known. So I've actually had multiple experiences with this. Every so often I'll get an email or DM from someone being like, hey, this person you interacted with is a fake friend and uses people to climb their way up a social ladder, or something like that. Well, first off, that's pretty much 70% of YouTube friendships. Yeah, we're friendly with each other, but we're also colleagues in a sense. So some of us are in fact gonna utilize friendships and connections to get ahead. So long as both sides recognize that that's what's going on, I don't think it's necessarily a terrible thing. And although being a bad friend may not be great for the ones feeling slighted, that's not really a cancelable offense, much less something to kick them off for a project unless you or other members of the group are finding it hard to deal with them. A bad friend also isn't exactly something you can properly verify, since what constitutes a bad friend can vary from person to person. So what should you do about this? Absolutely nothing. Okay, maybe not nothing. If the person kicking up a fuss is being relentless but has neither proof of wrongdoing nor witnesses to corroborate the story with, then you are fully within your right to tell them to buzz off, because as far as you're concerned, this is an unwarranted non-issue. Friendships fail all the time, and it's not the responsibility of the surrounding parties to tiptoe around that. Unless our buddy boy Jeff actively targeted, bullied, or harassed other people in the present, and there is either proof or an earnest attempt from someone to let you know without making it a public spectacle, then any interpersonal issues with those outside of what you're working on together should not become your problem.
Exhibit B.
Here's another example of when something goes awry. What do you do if Jeff is having some kind of public crash out in which they are entirely at fault? Maybe they were outspoken about a given topic and ended up giving a really bad take, like completely rancid, tone deaf, however you want to describe it, and they just kept digging themselves into a hole by engaging with other people and basically drowning in the discourse. Onlookers are now side-eyeing Jeff like one of the ghouls from Fallout, and are also aware that this person is a part of your team, working on the thing you're making. So what do? Well, you now have indisputable proof that they have done something wrong and are tied to your project. So unfortunately, you can't get out of saying nothing this time, because the one thing about coordinating a project is that in the eyes of the general population, the behaviour of one person reflects back on you. But before you also go jumping into the discourse, what you should instead think about doing, first and foremost, is contacting them privately in an attempt to understand why they said what they did. This will obviously depend on the severity of what was said. If Jeff's going around throwing slurs or spewing some extremist rhetoric, then that definitely warrants a one strike and you're out policy. But in a lot of these situations, you often find that many ignorant takes are based on just that, ignorance. It's not impossible for someone to come back from that so long as both of you are willing to talk to and hear each other out. To be able to admit when you're wrong is a sign that someone is able to come around from any preconceived biases or personal issues, and that shouldn't go unacknowledged. But even with that said, it's completely normal for people to have one or two personal beliefs that don't especially align with everyone else, and personally I think that's an important thing to highlight and respect, so long as they respect others' opinions in turn. Online discourse has become far too preoccupied with morality and virtue signaling to the point where it can risk taking focus away from more important issues. You can of course still have hard lines and boundaries about the kinds of people you want involved in your project, but it is still vital to at least extend that olive branch first and come at the discussion with an open mind so that the person has the opportunity to work out why they currently think in such a way and whether or not they want to continue without feeling like they have to be on the offensive. If you immediately come at them like, oh my god, why the f did you just say that, then you've already lost any hope of the person listening to you and reaching a mutually satisfying resolution. But if that resolution can be reached and you're able to bring them around, what you can then do is work together to write up a public response or apology for what was said, whereby Jeff is able to acknowledge where they went wrong in their wording or better construct what they were meant to say. This is of course going to depend a lot on the actual context of a given situation, but you're at the least working together to resolve things rather than being on opposite sides. Which then brings me to my final example.
Oh great, of course, here it comes. You can't keep doing this. You can't keep doing shitty things and then feel bad about yourself like that makes it okay. You need to be better.
So picture this. You're working with Jeff, who is incredible at what they do. They've brought a lot of attention to the project, they've had a hand in its popularity, maybe they're even the face of it almost, or at least have a lot of sway in what people think about it. You have someone cool, competent, and efficient helping you out, and the project is doing amazing because of them. Things are looking fantastic, until of course, news breaks out on social media by someone, either a victim or an advocate of one, coming forward with information, screenshots, documents, recordings, and testimonies, all pointing towards Jeff being an absolutely horrific person behind the scenes. This in itself comes at various levels, but for the sake of brevity, we're going to assume that it's something unilaterally understood to be a terrible thing, perhaps even a criminal act of some kind. And while you're trying to pore through the evidence provided and attempting to just understand all of this earth-shattering information, the general public have rallied against Jeff and are demanding that they immediately withdraw from the public and cease operations on everything they were working on. And there it is. Suddenly people realize that Jeff was helping you out with something, and all of that ire and outrage turns onto you and your project. And for however brief a time that ends up being, it is brutal. People are throwing all kinds of accusations around, saying you knew, saying you covered for Jeff, and making all sorts of speculations and assumptions as to your own character and that of the other crew members. This, understandably, is a terrifying worst-case scenario for a project. So I ask you one more time, what do you do? And first off, the one thing that you do not do is panic, because when you panic, that ends up making you more prone to giving into a variety of anxiety-fueled impulses like jumping on the defensive as soon as the news comes to light, which is one of the worst things you can do because that will not only come across as you trying to cover something up, but it will also potentially come across as you trying to do damage control and speaking over the victim. One of the most critically important aspects of a situation like this, even though it may be difficult in those initial few moments to remember because your brain is going into overdrive, is to understand that whatever situation has emerged regarding Jeff's behaviour is not about you. If there is a situation that has come about in which a person has been hurt or victimized, then that person must remain at the center of the discussion. The focus should always, always, always be on the victim, their experience, and what they want out of coming forward, whether that be closure, solidarity, justice, or something else. Anything else will come second. So the first thing you should do is take the time to listen and understand exactly what is being said and why. Circumstances like these are extremely precarious. There can be a lot of moving parts and a lot of aspects that you need to be sensitive to. So before you even think about opening your mouth or putting out any posts of your own, you let the information put out by the victim to be the main focus, no matter what anyone might be saying about Jeff's involvement with your project. Ignore that shit for the time being and focus on the important stuff, because people will always be at their most reactionary right after the news has broken, but that doesn't mean you should give in to the demands and put out an immediate response, because it will be rushed, it will be poorly worded, and it may not properly represent your stance on things, because at this stage, you probably don't even know what your stance is yet. Once you have a better understanding of the situation, the next best thing to do is pause any and all work that Jeff has had a hand in. Don't try to continue on as if nothing has happened just because Jeff isn't present anymore, because that will come across as being in really poor taste. During this time, you want to take the time to put out a very brief statement, acknowledging the information that has come to light about Jeff, and validating the concerns and feelings of the victim. What you should also not do under any circumstances in this time between the info coming out and compiling this statement is speak directly to Jeff in any form, even if they contact you first. Because if people get the slightest inkling that Jeff is influencing what you're saying, that is not going to pan out well. Until you are able to fully verify whether all the information that has been released is truthful or not, you should not engage privately with the accused in any way. No DMs, no emails, nothing. If they reach out to you and state they are willing to speak to you though, what you can do is agree to do this so long as a third party is present to corroborate on anything that is said. You can also insist on any discussions had in things like phone calls being recorded. And the reason for all of this is that if it does end up being the case that the accusations lobbied against them are true, especially if it ends up being something like a potential criminal offence, you do not, under any circumstances, want to be incriminated by interacting with this person. If they are potentially breaking the law, then any and all discussion needs to be public and transparent to any parties who may ask about it. I know this might sound like overkill because the online space likes to sensationalize a lot of stuff, and you're probably desensitized to a lot of things because they're reported on so frequently, but trust me, in this specific instance, it is not overkill. This is often exactly how this stuff would typically be dealt with in the real world, so having it take place online doesn't make it any different. If Jeff refuses to compromise on that and is unwilling to openly discuss the events with you or anyone else, then that is grounds to immediately kick them from the project, even before any claims or accusations by the victims can be proven. At the end of the day, this is their mess, and while it is good practice to do your due diligence and investigate the matter, you are not obliged to stick by someone who is getting attention for all the wrong reasons. It's perfectly understandable to save yourself the headache and put some distance between them, but if that does end up being your decision, you still need to make that clear to anyone looking at your project. Make it abundantly clear that this person is no longer affiliated with your work, and only after doing that should you begin to pick up where you left off. So yeah, TLDR, if someone just plain doesn't like Jeff for whatever reason and is being a nuisance, or if Jeff ends up having bad vibes but ultimately hasn't done anything wrong, you can either tell the person to get lost or let Jeff down gently and just go your separate ways. If Jeff ends up making a big public faux pas, talk with them first to see if you can reach an understanding and help them in correcting the issue. And if Jeff is accused of an extremely serious case of misconduct, firstly verify any claims made against the evidence given, acknowledge the victim's claims and the concerns of the public, be transparent in terms of any interactions with the accused, and only take action when you finally have all the facts. Being hasty only tends to work when you have a very firm grasp on what you're doing. Otherwise, it can and will become your biggest undoing. The main takeaway from all of this, as well as any other particular circumstances, is ultimately to take a moment to step back and look at the bigger picture before making any kind of decision. Give yourself some breathing room in order to process any information or immediate circumstances before leaping into action. Working on something on the internet kind of means that you have to behave as if you are your own PR team and HR representative wrapped into one. So you need to both be firm in your decisions, but also flexible enough to be able to take in relevant info and adapt to any emerging circumstances. And also, at the end of the day, we're making things for entertainment on a screen. We're not saving lives. None of what we're doing is more important than making sure we're surrounding ourselves with the right kind of people and ensuring that others around us are able to both enjoy creating something together, as well as enjoy looking at those creations in kind. But anyway, that's all for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this is at least somewhat helpful to you all. No one especially likes thinking about these sides of the creative spaces. They're very boring and bureaucratic, I know, but they're also really useful in making sure that your operations run as smoothly as possible, and it also shows other people that you are willing to be proactive if a situation does come up. Like I said, a lot of this will likely come across as common sense, but even then, I know that a lot of people coming into the indie space right now will be those who are working on or managing a creative group project for the first time, so I still think it's important to highlight certain things just based on that fact alone, as well as to reassure people that the best way to solve an issue is usually the most straightforward option, even if you're dealing with a lot of background noise from people demanding otherwise. A great big thank you to my patrons. You are all my special little guys. Thank you to my tip jar supporter, Pedanticat. Thank you to my YouTube peeps, Manuel Legzon Gonzalez, Mystic Mind, Lauren R, Ash Valentine, Lonim the Hair, Craig, Edboy, Stevka's Doodles, and Why Not Warrior. And an extra special thank you to my indie production supporters, Morgan LaFade Thin, Matty A, Kiyoshi, Roundcat, and Arsonist. If you're interested in joining the Patreon, a link can be found in the video description. Anyway, that's all from me. If you like the video, let me know. If you have any suggestions for other topics, also let me know. Or just let me know about anything in general. Stay safe, everyone, and I will speak to you all very soon. Bye for now!